Tonight's story takes us back to a time when humanity was still divided into different paths. A world without cities, without borders, without history. Only survival. This is the story of two lives that briefly crossed in a world that would never be the same again. The boy had never seen a face like that before. He had followed the river further than usual, past the berry bushes, past the fallen birch, into a part of the forest where the air felt heavier and older. His tribe avoided this place, not out of fear exactly, but out of habit. It belonged to something else. He noticed the stranger when he bent down to drink, broader shoulders, shorter legs, a face that seemed carved rather than grown, with eyes set deep under a heavy brow. The boy froze, spear half raised, heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. The stranger noticed him too. They stared at each other in silence, two different kinds of humans standing on the same soil, both uncertain of what the other meant. Neither spoke, not because they couldn't, but because no shared words existed yet. The Neanderthal was the first to move. Slowly, deliberately, he placed a small bundle on the ground between them, roots, cracked nuts, and the leg of a small animal, freshly hunted. An offering. The boy hesitated, then mirrored the gesture, setting down dried berries and a piece of smoked meat from his tribe's fire. They didn't smile, but something in the tension loosened. Hunger was a language both understood. They parted without agreement, without signals, without expectation. And yet the next day, they both returned, not to meet, just to see. Over the following days, the distance between them shrank. They didn't live together, but their paths crossed often, at the river, along the ridgeline, near the caves where the wind howled at night. They learned each other's movements, gestures, and meanings. A raised chin meant danger. A slow hand on the chest meant calm. A tap against stone meant follow. Sometimes they hunted separately. Sometimes they walked in the same direction without planning to. Sometimes they simply sat nearby, sharing the same space without needing to explain why. The boy began to notice patterns. The Neanderthal moved differently. He wasted no motion. Every step had purpose. When he hunted, he didn't chase, he waited. When he gathered food, he chose with certainty, never touching what could harm him. The boy, in return, carried knowledge from his tribe. Simple tools made faster, sharper stones, small tricks that made daily life easier. He showed how to twist plant fibers into stronger cords, how to dry meat longer so it would last, how to carry embers safely from one place to another. None of this was spoken. It was demonstrated, observed, repeated. In time, they began to travel short distances together, not side by side, not always, but within sight, within trust. Once they reached a valley neither had seen before. The land was strange, open, too open. No familiar paths, no familiar trees. The boy felt exposed. The Neanderthal stopped walking. He crouched, pressed his hand to the soil, stayed still longer than the boy thought necessary. Then he shook his head once. Danger. They turned back. That evening, when a distant roar rolled through the valley behind them, the boy understood. Winter came early that year. The animals moved deeper into the valleys. The rivers froze. Hunger became a constant companion, not as sharp as fear, but more persistent. The boy's tribe lost 2 elders to the cold. The Neanderthals group, smaller and already fragile, lost even more. One morning, the boy found the Neanderthal alone. No tracks of others nearby, no voices, no signs of a group. Just him, sitting by the rocks, staring at nothing. The boy immediately understood. Loss didn't need words. From that point on, the meetings stopped being accidental. The boy began to seek him out deliberately, not every day, but often enough. They shared what they had, small amounts of food, pieces of knowledge, the comfort of not facing the cold entirely alone. It was then that the boy showed him fire, not as a miracle, but as a method. Dry bark, friction, patience. The Neanderthal watched closely, tried, failed, tried again. Days passed before the first weak flame finally caught. His reaction wasn't joy, but something quieter and heavier. Understanding. This wasn't just warmth. This was survival stretched into the future. From that moment, something shifted. They began to move more often together, not as a tribe, not as brothers, but as two beings who had learned that cooperation made the world slightly less cruel. They tracked herds side by side. They warned each other of danger. When one noticed movement in the distance, the other trusted it without question. Spring came, but it came violently. The rivers swelled faster than expected. Rain fell for days. The ground softened. The familiar crossing near the old stones disappeared under rushing water. They attempted to cross anyway. The boy slipped first. The current caught his legs and pulled him sideways. Panic rose instantly. He couldn't fight it. He could only react. The Neanderthal didn't hesitate. He grabbed the boy's arm with a force that hurt, pulled him back toward the shore. They collapsed into the mud together, breathing hard, soaked, shaken, but alive. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the Neanderthal placed his hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. Not as comfort, not as gratitude, just as acknowledgement. The world remained dangerous. Later that season, they encountered others. Not from the boy's tribe, not from the Neanderthal's former group. Strangers. They watched from a distance at first, taller, moving in tighter formation, carrying more tools than necessary. Their eyes followed the two with interest that didn't feel neutral. The boy felt it immediately. The Neanderthal felt it sooner. They avoided them when possible, changed paths, traveled at different hours. But the land was narrowing, food was scarce, encounters became harder to avoid. One evening, they realized they were being followed, not hunted, watched. The strangers didn't attack. They simply stayed close enough to be present, close enough to be known. It unsettled the boy more than open hostility would have. Eventually, the tension broke. They were near a rocky slope when the strangers finally approached openly. 3 of them, spears visible, movements cautious, but not friendly. The boy stood still, unsure. The Neanderthal shifted slightly forward, body tense. There was no immediate violence, only assessment, glances, judgments made without language. One of the strangers stepped closer to the boy, ignoring the Neanderthal entirely, reached toward the food bundle he carried. The Neanderthal reacted instantly. He stepped between them. No strike, no shout, just presence. It was enough. The strangers hesitated, looked between the two, then slowly backed away. They didn't return. After that, the boy began to understand something deeper than survival. This connection they had formed wasn't common, wasn't expected, wasn't welcomed by others. It made them both different. Summer brought movement. The boys' tribe began to expand their territory. More children, more voices, more fires. They traveled in larger groups, covered greater distances. With them came a new energy, confidence, momentum. The Neanderthal noticed it immediately. The forests that had once belonged to silence now held unfamiliar sounds, new rhythms, new patterns, new dominance. He didn't express fear, he expressed awareness. Their meetings grew less frequent, not by choice, by circumstance. Sometimes weeks passed. When they met again, both had changed slightly. The boy carried more tools, more confidence, more responsibility. The Neanderthal carried more caution, more solitude, more weight. Once, they walked together for 3 days, No particular destination, just movement. On the fourth day, they found the remains of another Neanderthal. Bones, broken tools, no signs of ceremony. The boy didn't know what to do. The Neanderthal did. He arranged the stones carefully, covered what needed covering, sat in silence for a long time. The boy stayed. That was the first time he truly understood that extinction wasn't a sudden thing. It was a quiet accumulation of absences. Seasons passed. Years passed. The boy became a man. His shoulders broadened. His movements slowed. His decisions grew heavier. Children watched him now the way he had once watched elders. The Neanderthal aged differently. His body remained strong, but the world around him thinned. Fewer tracks, fewer familiar signs, fewer voices like his. Their final meeting came without drama. They found each other again at the river where it had begun, older, marked by weather, carrying the evidence of long survival. They shared food. They sat. They watched the water. The boy gestured toward the distant hills, where smoke rose from many fires. The Neanderthal gestured toward the deeper forest, where the trees stood untouched. They understood. No words, no farewell ritual, just recognition. They stood for a moment longer than usual, then they turned and walked away. Years later, the man would sometimes feel the memory of another presence while traveling alone, sometimes when choosing which routes to eat, sometimes when listening to the ground, sometimes when showing children how to notice danger without seeing it. He'd never speak the story aloud, not because it was secret, but because language had never been necessary for it. It existed somewhere deeper than memory, in instinct, in adaptation, in survival. Two branches of humanity had crossed briefly, and though one would fade, something of that meeting remained. Not as history, not as legend, but as inheritance. And maybe that is how most of humanity's story truly unfolded. Not through great battles, not through grand speeches, but through small moments, quiet choices, and fragile connections that shaped everything that came after. If you found this story calming, meaningful, or simply worth experiencing, you're welcome to stay. More stories like this will follow. Different lives, different eras, the same fragile thread of humanity. Good night.